At St. Cecilia's missionary boarding school, two sisters, Amora and Kyra, arrive with hopes of a better future, but their world turns dark when students begin to mysteriously vanish. When their friend Clara disappears, the sisters uncover a chilling secret hidden within the school's walls. As they delve deeper, they discover forbidden rituals, blood-stained symbols, and a sinister force controlling the school. With danger lurking at every corner, the sisters must decide how far they are willing to go to uncover the truth before they become the next victims. The iron gates of St. Cecilia's boarding school for girls stood like sentinels, their black frames covered in creeping ivy. The two sisters, Amora and Kyra, exchanged uneasy glances as their father's car rolled into the courtyard. The air was still, except for the faint sound of a bell tolling in the distance. Amora, the elder of the two at 16, tightened her grip on Kyra's hand. At 13, Kyra was wide-eyed and curious, but Amora could sense her younger sister's nerves. Sister Bernadette, a tall, austere figure in a starched white habit, greeted them. Her sharp eyes inspected the girls as if assessing their worthiness. "Welcome to St. Cecilia's," she said in a tone that lacked warmth. Their father, a devout man seeking a strict Catholic education for his daughters, handed over their suitcases. "Behave and pray," he muttered before driving off, leaving the sisters in this unfamiliar world. The dormitory was a long, echoing hall lined with narrow beds. The other girls whispered and stared as Amora and Kyra were shown to their bunks. "Lights out at 9, Sister Bernadette announced before leaving. Amora sat on her bed, trying to comfort Kyra. "It's just a school," she said, but the words felt hollow. That night, as the sisters lay in the darkness, a low murmur of prayer echoed through the halls. Amora couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows in St. Cecilia's hid more than just the usual boarding school secrets. The morning at St. Cecilia's began with the solemn toll of the chapel bell. Amora and Kyra joined the other girls in the dimly lit prayer hall, where Sister Marguerite led a hymn that resonated through the stone walls. The sisters couldn't help but notice the subdued expressions on the other students' faces. No one laughed or whispered, the air was heavy, almost suffocating. Breakfast was a quiet affair, the clinking of spoons against porcelain plates the only sound. Kyra, eager to break the silence, whispered to the girl beside her. "Hi, I'm Kyra. What's your name?" The girl, a frail figure with dark circles under her eyes, glanced around nervously before replying, "Evelyn." Her voice was barely audible. Amora leaned in. "Is everyone always this quiet?" she asked. Evelyn's eyes darted to the far end of the dining hall, where Sister Bernadette stood observing. "You'll understand soon enough," Evelyn whispered before quickly finishing her porridge. Classes began after breakfast. The nuns taught a strict curriculum of mathematics, literature, and scripture. Amora noticed that the teachers' smiles never reached their eyes, and Kyra found herself struggling to focus under their stern gazes. During the midday break, the sisters explored the sprawling grounds. The gardens were beautiful but eerily deserted. "Where is everyone?" Kyra asked, her voice echoing in the stillness. Later that night, as the sisters settled into bed, Amora heard it for the first time, a faint sound, like footsteps in the hallway. She sat up, her heart racing. "Kyra," she whispered, shaking her sister awake. Kyra groggily opened her eyes. "Do you hear that?" Amora asked. Kyra listened, and then they both froze as a muffled scream pierced the silence. It was faint but unmistakable. "Amora," Kyra's voice trembled. "What's going on here?" The scream hung in Amora's memory like a haunting melody, growing louder with each passing moment. Morning came too soon, and the sisters forced themselves to face the day. At breakfast, Evelyn seemed unusually pale and quiet, her eyes darting nervously around the dining hall. Amora couldn't ignore it. After a few hesitant attempts, she managed to pull Evelyn aside during their midday break. "What's happening here?" Amora asked. Her voice was firm but laced with desperation. Evelyn's lips quivered as if deciding whether to speak. Finally, she relented, her voice barely above a whisper. "Strange things happen at night. Girls go missing. No one talks about it, but we all know. The nuns say they are transferred, but," she trailed off, her eyes filled with dread. Amora pressed further, but Evelyn shook her head. "You're new. Don't ask too many questions. If they notice you, you'll regret it." Before Amora could reply, Sister Bernadette appeared at the far end of the hallway, her sharp gaze cutting through the distance. Evelyn stiffened. "I have to go," she murmured, hurrying away. Amora returned to Kyra, her mind racing with Evelyn's cryptic words. She relayed everything to her younger sister, who listened intently, her face pale. "Do you think the nuns are lying?" Kyra asked hesitantly. Amora sighed. "I don't know. But I do know one thing, this place isn't what it seems." That night, the sisters resolved to stay awake. Amora held Kyra's hand tightly as they sat on her bed, listening to the creaks and groans of the old building. Hours passed in silence, but just as their eyelids began to droop, faint footsteps echoed down the hall. Amora's heart raced. Something, or someone, was moving in the darkness. The faint footsteps grew louder, and Amora's grip on Kyra's hand tightened. "Stay here," she whispered. Kyra clung to her arm. "No. Don't leave me." Amora hesitated but knew they couldn't both hide. Steeling herself, she crept to the door and peered into the dim hallway. A shadow moved at the far end, dragging something heavy. The figure paused, as if sensing her presence, and then vanished around the corner. Amora's breath caught. She slipped back into the room, her face pale. "Someone's out there," she whispered. Kyra whimpered. "What are they dragging?" Neither of them slept at night, their minds replaying the sound of footsteps and the shadowy figure. Morning brought no relief. The girls in the dining hall seemed as subdued as ever, their expressions hollow. Evelyn sat alone, staring into her bowl of porridge. Amora approached her again, despite Kyra's protest. "I saw something last night," Amora said. Evelyn's face turned ashen. "I warned you to stop asking questions," she said sharply, her voice trembling. "If they think you know too much, you'll end up like Clara." Amora's heart sank. "Who's Clara?" Evelyn looked around nervously. "She was here 2 weeks ago. Now she's gone. They said her parents transferred her, but," she trailed off, leaving the unspoken truth hanging in the air. The next morning, the school buzzed with a quiet, nervous energy. Clara's absence was undeniable, but no one mentioned it outright. Amora scanned the dining hall, her eyes searching for Evelyn. When she finally spotted her, Evelyn was hunched over her bowl, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Amora slid into the seat beside her, ignoring Kyra's hesitant tug on her sleeve. "Clara's gone," she whispered. Evelyn flinched but didn't look up. "She's not the first," Evelyn murmured after a long pause. Her voice was flat, resigned. "She won't be the last." "What do you mean?" Amora pressed. Evelyn's hands trembled as she set her spoon down. "They say her parents transferred her, but I know that's a lie. She was terrified of the nuns. She told me she'd seen things. And now she's just gone." Evelyn stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "If you're smart, you'll stop asking questions." Amora watched her leave, a mix of anger and fear churning in her chest. Kyra leaned in, her voice barely audible. "What if we're next?" Amora's heart sank. She didn't have an answer, but the thought lingered like a dark cloud over the rest of the day. The weight of Evelyn's words sat heavily on Amora. She couldn't stop thinking about Clara's disappearance, and the cryptic things Evelyn had said about the school's dark side. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that things weren't right in this place. The nuns might have been good at hiding their true intentions, but the tension in the air, the nervous energy in the halls, was undeniable. That night, after the dormitory lights went out, Amora and Kyra made a quiet decision. They couldn't sit idly by and wait to become the next missing girls. They had to search for answers. Amora's heart was pounding as they sneaked out of their room, clutching a small flashlight that they had stolen from the kitchen earlier in the week. The school was eerily silent, the only sound being the occasional creak of floorboards or the rustling of the wind outside. They crept down the long hallway, careful to avoid the footsteps of any passing nuns. Amora's mind raced with possibilities. What was going on here? Why had Clara vanished? And why was everyone so afraid to talk about it? As they reached the end of the hall, they paused in front of a door they had never noticed before. It was an old wooden door, tucked in the corner and hidden behind a large tapestry. "This doesn't feel right," Kyra whispered. Amora pressed her ear against the door. Silence. No voices, no movement. But something told her that this door was important. She reached for the handle, hesitated, and then twisted it. The door creaked open, revealing a dusty room full of old furniture and forgotten relics. The air smelled stale, and the dim lights from their flashlights barely illuminated the corners of the room. "Let's check it out," Amora said softly. She stepped inside, and Kyra followed, both of them scanning the room for any clues. As they moved deeper into the space, Amora noticed something strange in the corner. A pile of tattered uniforms. She pulled one from the top of the pile, and her heart sank. It was Clara's. The sight of Clara's uniform in the dark storeroom made Amora's breath catch in her throat. She could hardly process what she was seeing. Clara's clothes, folded and discarded, were a chilling reminder of the girl who had vanished. Amora's mind raced as she looked around the room. It was filled with old furniture, some broken and others covered in sheets of dust, but the uniforms seemed out of place. "What does this mean?" Kyra whispered, her voice trembling as she picked up another piece of clothing. Amora's hands shook as she carefully examined the room, searching for any other signs of Clara's presence. Beneath the pile of uniforms, she noticed something glinting in the faint light, an object that caught her attention. It was a silver bracelet, delicate and simple, with a small charm shaped like a bird. Amora's heart skipped. "This is Clara's bracelet," Amora whispered. She had seen it on Clara's wrist the last time they were together. What was it doing here, hidden in the storeroom? Was Clara being kept here, or was something worse happening to her? Before Amora could consider the possibility further, Kyra pulled her attention to a stack of old notebooks lying on a dusty shelf. Amora grabbed one, opening it to the first page. The handwriting was frantic, as though the writer had been trying to communicate something important. "They take us," one of the entries read. "We disappear, and no one questions. The nuns know. They all know. What does it mean?" Kyra asked, peering over her shoulder. Amora shook her head. "I don't know, but we need to find out. We have to stop whatever is happening here." Suddenly, they heard footsteps outside the door. A cold dread washed over them. "Someone's coming," Kyra hissed. Amora grabbed Kyra's hand, and together, they sprinted to the back of the room. There was no time to think. They found an old window at the far end of the storeroom, half open and barely big enough for them to squeeze through. Without a second thought, they climbed out and into the night, their hearts pounding as they ran for cover. The air outside was cool and damp as Amora and Kyra crouched in the shadow of the school, hearts racing after their narrow escape. Their hands still shook as they huddled together, trying to catch their breath. They had barely made it out of the storeroom unnoticed, but the tension between them was palpable. "What now?" Kyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Amora's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The bracelet, Clara's uniform, and the disturbing journals had only deepened the mystery. But the question of where Clara had gone remained unanswered. They needed to investigate further. But what if they weren't alone in the darkness? What if the nuns were watching, waiting for them to slip up? "We need to go back," Amora said, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. "We have to know what's behind that door, the one in the chapel. There has to be more. There has to be something else we missed." Kyra hesitated. "It's dangerous, Amora. What if we get caught?" But Amora was resolute. "We have to do this. We have no choice." The sisters made their way through the quiet grounds, moving as quickly as possible without drawing attention. They avoided the main paths, choosing instead to slip through the narrow alleys between the buildings. The chapel loomed in the distance, and as they approached, Amora's pulse quickened. It was as if the very walls of the place held a dark secret. As they entered the chapel, the familiar smell of incense filled the air. The altar stood at the far end, bathed in the flickering light of candles. But it wasn't the altar that caught Amora's attention. It was the door behind it, the one she had noticed during her earlier visit. This time, she was determined to open it. Amora and Kyra stood in front of the door, hearts pounding, both of them aware that whatever they discovered beyond it could change everything. Amora's hand trembled as she placed it on the cold, wooden handle. The door creaked slightly as she pushed, but it didn't open easily. She applied more pressure, her muscles straining, until the door finally gave way with a groan. They stepped inside, the dim light from the candles in the chapel barely illuminating their surroundings. The air was thick with dust, and the room beyond was small, cramped. There were shelves stacked with old religious texts and candles, but nothing that stood out. At first, it appeared to be a forgotten storage room. But as they moved further into the room, Amora noticed something strange. In one corner, hidden behind a stack of old boxes, was a trapdoor, similar to the one they had found in the storeroom. This one, however, was sealed shut with a heavy iron lock. Kyra glanced at Amora, her face pale. "Do you think it's the same?" she whispered. Amora nodded. "It has to be. Whatever's hidden here, it's important." She reached into her pocket, pulling out a thin hairpin they had used to open the previous door. With trembling hands, she worked on the lock, her mind racing with what they might find. After what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked open. The trapdoor slowly creaked upward, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. Hello listeners, thank you for listening to this story. I'd really appreciate it if, after enjoying this story, you could take a moment to like, share, subscribe and leave a comment on how soon you want me to release part 2 of this story. Your support means a lot and helps encourage me to keep sharing more stories. Thank you.